It was a warm summer evening, and the annual work party was in full swing. The company had rented out a luxurious banquet hall, complete with elegant decorations, an open bar, and a live band playing soft jazz in the background. Employees mingled, chatted, and laughed, enjoying the respite from the daily grind. The air was filled with the clinking of glasses and the hum of conversation. I stood near the bar, nursing a drink and trying to relax after a long week. My wife, Emily, was across the room, talking animatedly with some of my colleagues. She looked radiant in her sapphire blue dress, her laughter ringing out like a bell. I felt a surge of pride and love for her, grateful to have her by my side. As the evening progressed, I found myself in various conversations with coworkers, discussing everything from work projects to personal hobbies. I chatted with John from accounting about the latest football game and exchanged book recommendations with Sarah from marketing. Despite the lively atmosphere, I couldn't shake a feeling of unease that had settled over me. The event was a much-anticipated affair every year, giving employees a chance to let loose and connect outside the office. The company spared no expense, ensuring there were plenty of activities and entertainment options. There was a photo booth in one corner where people were lining up to take goofy pictures with props, a dance floor where couples swayed to the music, and even a magician performing tricks for small groups of fascinated onlookers. Emily and I had planned to stay until the end, but as the night wore on, I noticed a few odd interactions. Emily was spending a lot of time with Mr. Harris, my boss, and their conversations seemed unusually intense. At one point, I saw him lean in close to whisper something in her ear, causing her to stiffen and then force a smile. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. My instincts told me to keep an eye on them, so I maneuvered myself closer, pretending to be engrossed in a conversation with a coworker while eavesdropping on Emily and Mr. Harris. Their discussion was mostly mundane, revolving around work and upcoming projects, but there was an underlying tension that I couldn't ignore. It was in the way Mr. Harris's eyes lingered on Emily a little too long, and the way she avoided meeting his gaze. My unease grew, but I couldn't quite put my finger on what was wrong. As the evening continued, I decided to take a break from socializing and stepped outside for some fresh air. The night was cool, a welcome contrast to the warmth inside the hall. I wandered through the garden, trying to clear my head. The stars were out in full force, and the peaceful atmosphere did wonders to calm my nerves. While I was outside, I ran into Dave, a colleague from the IT department. Dave was a good friend, someone I trusted. We chatted for a while about work and life, and I found myself confiding in him about my concerns. "Dave, have you noticed anything strange about Harris tonight?" I asked, trying to sound casual. Dave raised an eyebrow. "You mean besides the fact that he's been hovering around Emily all night?" "Yeah, I've noticed. It's weird, man. He's usually more reserved at these things." I sighed, feeling slightly better knowing I wasn't imagining things. "I just don't get it. Why would he be so interested in her all of a sudden?" Dave shrugged. "Could be anything, really. Maybe he's just drunk and acting stupid. But if you're really worried, maybe you should talk to Emily about it." I nodded, knowing he was right. "Yeah, I think I will. Thanks, Dave." We finished our conversation, and I headed back inside, determined to talk to Emily and get to the bottom of this. When I found her, she was standing alone near the bar, looking a bit lost in thought. "Hey," I said, touching her arm gently. "Can we talk for a minute?" She looked up at me, her expression guarded. "Sure, Michael. What's up?" I led her to a quieter corner of the room, away from prying eyes and ears. "I've been noticing some weird vibes tonight," I began, trying to choose my words carefully. "Between you and Mr. Harris. Is everything okay?" Emily sighed, running a hand through her hair. "I didn't want to worry you, but no, everything's not okay. Harris has been making some very inappropriate comments to me all night. It's been making me really uncomfortable." My heart sank. "Why didn't you tell me sooner?" "I didn't want to ruin the evening for you," she said softly. "But it's been bothering me. I just didn't know what to do." I felt a surge of protectiveness and anger. "You should have told me. We need to do something about this." Before we could discuss it further, Mr. Harris himself appeared, his face a mask of forced cheerfulness. "Michael, Emily, enjoying the party?" he asked, his tone overly friendly. Emily stiffened beside me, and I stepped forward, putting myself between her and Harris. "Actually, Harris, there's something we need to talk about," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. He raised an eyebrow, looking genuinely curious. "Oh? What's that?" But before I could respond, we were interrupted by the announcement that the raffle was about to start. It was one of the highlights of the evening, with prizes ranging from gift cards to a weekend getaway. Harris's attention shifted to the stage, and I took the opportunity to pull Emily away. "We'll talk about this later," I whispered to her, and she nodded, looking relieved. We joined the crowd for the raffle, trying to blend in and enjoy the rest of the evening. But the tension between us and Mr. Harris loomed like a dark cloud, threatening to ruin the night. The raffle went on, with people cheering and clapping as winners were announced. Emily and I didn't win anything, but it was a welcome distraction from the earlier events. As the night drew to a close, I kept a close eye on Mr. Harris, making sure he didn't get too close to Emily again. When the party finally ended, we said our goodbyes and headed home. The drive was quiet, both of us lost in our thoughts. I knew we couldn't avoid the conversation forever, but for now, I was just glad to be away from the party and the uncomfortable situation with Harris. As we pulled into our driveway, I turned to Emily. "We'll figure this out," I promised her. "Together." She smiled weakly. "I know. Thank you, Michael." Little did we know this was just the beginning of a nightmare that would turn our lives upside down. The night after the work party, I found it difficult to sleep. My mind kept replaying the events, especially Emily's discomfort around Mr. Harris. Something was gnawing at me, a feeling that there was more to the story than Emily had let on. I decided that the next day I would confront her about it. Morning came, and I woke up to the smell of coffee. Emily was already in the kitchen preparing breakfast. She looked tired, her eyes red from lack of sleep. I could tell she was just as troubled as I was. "Good morning," I said, trying to sound casual as I entered the kitchen. "Morning," she replied, forcing a smile. "I made some coffee. Want a cup?" "Sure, thanks," I said, taking a seat at the table. I watched her as she poured the coffee, my mind racing with questions. Finally, I decided to dive in. "Emily, we need to talk about last night." She sighed, her shoulders slumping. "I knew this was coming. Go ahead, Michael." "What's really going on between you and Mr. Harris?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. "You said he made inappropriate comments, but it seemed like there was more to it than that." Emily set the coffee pot down and took a seat across from me. She looked down at her hands, avoiding my gaze. "Michael, there's something I need to tell you, and it's not going to be easy." I felt my heart start to race. "What is it?" She took a deep breath and finally looked up at me, her eyes filled with a mixture of guilt and resolve. "I've been having an affair with Mr. Harris." The words hit me like a freight train. I stared at her, unable to process what she had just said. "What? How long has this been going on?" "About 6 months," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "I'm sorry, Michael. I didn't mean for it to happen, but it did." I felt a mix of anger, betrayal, and heartbreak. "Why, Emily? Why would you do this to us?" She looked down again, tears streaming down her face. "I don't know. I guess I felt like something was missing in our marriage. Harris made me feel wanted, special, and I didn't think you would ever find out." I stood up, unable to sit still any longer. "So what now? You're just going to leave me for him?" She wiped her tears and looked at me with a newfound determination. "Yes, Michael, I think it's for the best. I've realized that I don't need you anymore. Harris can give me the life I've always wanted." Her words were like a dagger to my heart. I had always thought we were happy, that we were building a future together. But now it was all falling apart. "Emily, please, we can work through this. We can go to counseling, try to fix things." She shook her head. It's too late for that. I'm sorry, Michael. I've made up my mind. I felt a surge of anger. So you were just going to tell me at the party, in front of everyone? No, she said, her voice trembling. I didn't plan for it to come out like that. But when Harris made that ridiculous demand, I felt trapped. I didn't want to hurt you like this, but it just happened. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. The woman I loved, the woman I had built my life with, was leaving me for another man. And not just any man, VDJ, my boss. It was like a cruel joke, a nightmare I couldn't wake up from. I took a deep breath, trying to calm myself. Fine. If that's what you want, then go, but don't expect me to just stand by and let Harris get away with this. Emily looked at me, her eyes filled with regret. I'm sorry, Michael. I never wanted to hurt you, but I have to follow my heart. She stood up and walked towards the door, her steps slow and hesitant. I watched her go, my heart breaking with each step she took. When she reached the door, she turned back to look at me one last time. Goodbye, Michael. And with that, she was gone. I stood there in the empty kitchen, feeling a mixture of rage and sorrow. My marriage was over, and my life had been turned upside down. I had no idea what to do next, but one thing was certain, VDJ, I wasn't going to let Harris get away with this. The day after Emily left was a blur. I called in sick to work, unable to face the office where everyone would soon know about the scandal. I spent most of the day in a daze, trying to come to terms with the fact that my marriage was over and that my wife had been having an affair with my boss. I decided to take a walk to clear my head. The neighborhood was quiet, with most people at work or school. As I walked, I tried to make sense of everything. How had things gone so wrong? Had I missed the signs? What could I have done differently? As I turned the corner, I ran into Dave from the IT department. He was walking his dog and looked surprised to see me. Hey, Michael, he said, stopping to talk. Everything okay? You didn't show up to work today? I forced a smile. Just needed a day off. How are you doing? Dave shrugged. Same old, but you don't look so good, man. Want to talk about it? I hesitated for a moment, then decided to confide in him. Emily left me. She's been having an affair with Harris. Dave's eyes widened in shock. No way. I noticed something weird at the party, but I didn't think it was that bad. I'm really sorry, Michael. Thanks, I said, appreciating his sympathy. I just don't know what to do now. She's gone, and I can't go back to work knowing Harris is there. Dave nodded, looking thoughtful. Have you considered talking to HR about it? Harris's behavior is definitely out of line. They might be able to help. I hadn't thought of that. Maybe. I guess it's worth a shot. We chatted for a while longer before parting ways. I felt a little better after talking to Dave, but I still had a long way to go before I could move on from this. When I got home, I decided to call HR. The phone rang a few times before a woman named Lisa answered. I explained the situation as calmly as I could, though my voice wavered at times. Michael, I'm so sorry to hear about this, Lisa said, her voice full of concern. This is definitely something we need to address. Can you come in tomorrow to discuss it further? Sure, I said, feeling a glimmer of hope. I'll be there. The next day, I dressed in my best suit and headed to the office. My stomach churned as I walked through the doors, but I was determined to see this through. I went straight to HR and was shown to Lisa's office. Michael, please have a seat, she said, gesturing to a chair. I've already started an investigation into Mr. Harris's conduct, but I need more details from you. I spent the next hour recounting everything that had happened, from the party to Emily's confession. Lisa took detailed notes, nodding sympathetically as I spoke. Thank you for sharing this, Michael, she said when I finished. We'll take this very seriously. In the meantime, I suggest you take some time off to clear your head. We'll keep you updated on the investigation. I left the office feeling a mix of relief and anxiety. It felt good to have someone on my side, but I knew this was far from over. I decided to take Lisa's advice and focus on taking care of myself for the time being. Over the next few days, I tried to stay busy. I went for long walks, caught up on reading, and even tried my hand at cooking a few new recipes. But no matter what I did, I couldn't escape the thoughts of Emily and Harris. It felt like a constant weight on my shoulders, dragging me down. One evening, as I was sitting on the couch flipping through channels, my phone buzzed. It was a message from Emily. "Can we talk?" she had written. My heart skipped a beat. I didn't know if I was ready to face her, but I knew I couldn't avoid her forever. With a deep breath, I replied, "Sure, when?" "Tomorrow afternoon at the park near our house," she suggested. "Okay," I typed back, my hands trembling slightly. "See you then." The next day I arrived at the park early. I found a bench and sat down, trying to calm my nerves. The park was quiet, with only a few people walking their dogs or jogging. The peaceful surroundings did little to ease my anxiety. After what felt like an eternity, I saw Emily approaching. She looked nervous, her eyes red from crying. She sat down next to me, and for a moment, neither of us spoke. "Michael, I'm so sorry," she finally said, her voice breaking. "I never wanted to hurt you." "Then why did you?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "Why, Emily?" She looked down, unable to meet my gaze. "I don't know. I felt lost, like I needed something more. Harris made me feel special, like I mattered." "And I didn't?" I asked, the hurt evident in my voice. "It's not that," she said quickly. "I know you love me and I love you too. But somewhere along the way we lost our connection. I was lonely and Harris took advantage of that." I shook my head, struggling to understand. "So what now? Are you with him?" She hesitated. She watched me go, her sobs echoing in the quiet park. As I walked away, I knew this was the end of our chapter together. There was no going back. The days following my conversation with Emily were some of the hardest I had ever faced. I felt lost and broken, trying to navigate life without the person I thought I would spend forever with. I focused on getting through each day, one step at a time. HR kept me updated on the investigation into Mr. Harris. They assured me that they were taking my allegations seriously and that appropriate actions would be taken. It was a small comfort in an otherwise tumultuous time. One afternoon, as I was sitting on my porch, lost in thought, my phone rang. It was Lisa from HR. "Hi, Michael. I wanted to give you an update," she said. "We've completed our investigation, and Mr. Harris has been suspended pending further review. We're committed to ensuring a safe and respectful work environment for all employees." I sighed with relief. "Thank you, Lisa. I appreciate everything you've done." "You're welcome. Take care of yourself, Michael. If you need anything, don't hesitate to reach out," she said before hanging up. With Harris suspended, I felt a small sense of justice. But there was still a gaping hole where my marriage had been. I knew I needed to find a way to move forward, to rebuild my life without Emily. I decided to take a short trip to clear my head. I packed a bag and drove to a cabin in the mountains that I had rented for a few days. The solitude and natural beauty provided a much-needed escape from the chaos of my thoughts. During my time at the cabin, I hiked through the forest, listened to the soothing sounds of nature, and tried to reconnect with myself. I spent hours reflecting on my life, my marriage, and what had led to its downfall. It was a painful but necessary process. On the third day of my retreat, I met an elderly man named Henry who was staying in a neighboring cabin. He was a retired professor with a kind smile and a wealth of wisdom. We struck up a conversation, and I found myself opening up to him about everything that had happened. "Sometimes life throws us curveballs," Henry said, sipping his coffee, "but it's how we respond to those challenges that defines us. You have a choice, Michael. You can let this break you, or you can use it as an opportunity to grow." His words resonated with me. I realized that I had been dwelling on my pain and anger, letting it consume me, but I didn't want to be defined by my suffering. I wanted to find a way to heal and move forward. When I returned home, I felt a renewed sense of determination. I decided to see a therapist to help me process my emotions and gain a healthier perspective on my situation. The sessions were difficult at times, but they provided valuable insights and tools for coping with my grief. I also reconnected with old friends and family members, seeking their support and advice. It was comforting to know that I wasn't alone, that there were people who cared about me and wanted to help me through this difficult time. One evening, I received an unexpected visit from Dave. He had heard about everything that had happened and wanted to check on me. "Hey, man," he said, giving me a sympathetic look. "I just wanted to see how you're holding up." I smiled, genuinely touched by his concern. "I'm doing better, thanks. It's been tough, but I'm getting through it." We spent the evening talking and catching up, and it felt good to have a friend by my side. Dave's presence reminded me that there was still goodness in my life, despite the recent turmoil. As the weeks passed, I gradually found a new sense of normalcy. I returned to work, where I was met with support and understanding from my colleagues. Harris's absence made the office environment more comfortable, and I focused on my projects with renewed energy. One day, I received an email from Emily. She apologized once again for everything that had happened and expressed hope that we could someday find peace and closure. Reading her words, I felt a mix of emotions, but I knew that I needed to respond. "Emily," I wrote back, "I appreciate your apology. While it's going to take time, I hope we can both move forward and find happiness in our own ways. I wish you the best." Hitting send, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. It was a step toward letting go of the past and embracing the future. In the months that followed, I focused on rebuilding my life. I pursued new hobbies, traveled to places I'd always wanted to visit, and deepened my connections with friends and family. Each day was a small step toward healing, and I began to see the possibilities that lay ahead. One evening, as I sat on my porch watching the sunset, I realized how far I had come. The pain and heartache were still there, but they no longer defined me. I had found strength in my struggles and emerged stronger and more resilient. Life had thrown me a curveball, but I had chosen to rise above it, and for that, I was proud. The following months after my brief trip were a mixture of healing and confusion. Though I had reconnected with friends and sought therapy, the wounds Emily left were far from healed. Each day brought its own challenges, and the prospect of facing the world without the woman I once loved was a burden I carried heavily. One Friday evening, a work email pinged on my phone. It was from HR, informing everyone about an upcoming work party, the first since Harris's suspension. I felt a knot form in my stomach at the thought of attending. However, I knew avoiding the event wouldn't help me move forward. I decided to go, hoping to find some semblance of normalcy and perhaps even closure. The night of the party, the banquet hall was as grand as ever. The decorations were tasteful, the bar was fully stocked, and the band played a lively tune. I wandered through the crowd, making small talk and trying to blend in. My eyes, however, kept searching for Emily, even though I knew it was unlikely she'd be there. I was midway through a conversation with John from accounting when I felt a tap on my shoulder. Turning around, I found myself face to face with Mr. Harris. He had a smug expression on his face, and my heart sank. He had returned to the company, apparently unscathed by the investigation. "Michael," he said, his voice dripping with condescension, "good to see you." I forced a smile, every fiber of my being wanting to avoid a confrontation. "Harris," I replied curtly. "Enjoying the party?" he asked, as if nothing had happened. I nodded, trying to keep my composure. "It's fine. Excuse me, I need to get a drink." I walked away, my mind racing. Seeing Harris again brought back all the anger and hurt I'd been trying to overcome. I headed to the bar and ordered a strong drink, hoping it would calm my nerves. As I sipped my drink, I felt a presence beside me. Turning, I saw Emily standing there. She looked as beautiful as ever, but there was a sadness in her eyes that hadn't been there before. "Michael," she said softly, "can we talk?" I swallowed hard, not sure if I was ready for this conversation, but I nodded, leading her to a quieter corner of the room. "What do you want, Emily?" I asked, my voice harsher than I intended. She flinched, then took a deep breath. "I wanted to apologize again for everything. I know I hurt you deeply, and I regret it every day." I sighed, running a hand through my hair. "It's too late for apologies, Emily. You made your choice." "I know," she said, tears welling up in her eyes. "But I need you to understand that it wasn't easy for me either. Harris manipulated me, made me feel like you weren't enough." The anger I had been holding back erupted. "And you believed him? You threw away our marriage for a man like that?" "I'm sorry," she whispered, her voice breaking. "I thought I wanted something more, but I was wrong. I was so wrong." Before I could respond, Mr. Harris approached us, his expression darkening. "Emily, leave him alone. This is not the time or place." Emily looked at him, then back at me. "No, Harris, this is exactly the time. Michael deserves to know the truth." Harris's face twisted with anger. "Emily, enough!" I stepped between them, my fury boiling over. "Don't talk to her like that. You don't get to control her anymore." The tension was palpable. I could feel the eyes of the room on us. The music had stopped, and the air was thick with anticipation. Harris took a step back, clearly not expecting me to stand up to him. "Let's go, Emily," he commanded, his voice shaking with barely contained rage. Emily hesitated, then took a step towards me. "I'm not going anywhere with you, Harris." The room fell silent. Everyone watched as the scene unfolded, their expressions a mix of shock and curiosity. Harris's face turned red with anger. "Fine," he spat. "But you'll regret this." With that, he turned and stormed out of the room. Emily and I stood there, the silence heavy between us. "I should go," she said finally, her voice barely a whisper. "Wait," I said, my heart pounding. "Stay, we need to talk." She looked at me, her eyes filled with hope and fear. "Okay." We found a quieter spot outside the hall, away from prying eyes. For a long time we just sat there, not saying a word. Finally, I broke the silence. "Why did you come back, Emily?" She sighed, looking up at the stars. "I realized I made a terrible mistake. I was blinded by Harris's charm and promises, but I see now that I was wrong. I want to make things right if you'll let me." I took a deep breath, the weight of her words settling over me. "It's not that simple, Emily. You broke my trust. Our marriage is in pieces." "I know," she said, her voice trembling, "but I want to try. I want to fix what I broke." I looked at her, my emotions a whirlwind of anger, hurt, and a flicker of hope. "It's going to take time, a lot of time." "I understand," she said, reaching out to take my hand. "I'm willing to do whatever it takes." As I looked into her eyes, I saw the sincerity there. Maybe, just maybe, we could find a way to rebuild. But I knew it wouldn't be easy. The road ahead was long and filled with uncertainty. For now, though, I was willing to take the first step. The days following the party were a whirlwind of emotions. Emily and I decided to take things slow, starting with couples therapy, to rebuild the trust that had been shattered. It was a challenging process, but both of us were committed to making it work. Meanwhile, Mr. Harris's presence at work remained a looming threat. Though he had been suspended, the investigation had not yet concluded. I was determined to see justice served, but it was difficult to focus on healing with the specter of Harris's potential return hanging over me. One evening, as Emily and I sat on the porch, she brought up a topic that had been weighing on her mind. "Michael, there's something I need to tell you." I turned to her, concern etched on my face. "What is it?" She took a deep breath, looking down at her hands. "I've been receiving messages from Harris. He's been threatening me, saying he'll ruin both of us if we don't back off." My blood ran cold. "Why didn't you tell me sooner?" "I didn't want to worry you," she said, her voice trembling. "But it's getting worse. I think we need to do something about it." I nodded, anger and determination boiling within me. "You're right. We can't let him get away with this. We need to go to the police." The next day, we visited the local police station and filed a report. The officers took our statements seriously and assured us they would investigate. It was a small comfort, but it felt like a step in the right direction. A few days later, I received a call from Lisa in HR. "Michael, I wanted to let you know that Harris has been officially terminated. The investigation revealed multiple instances of inappropriate behavior, and the company has decided to part ways with him." Relief washed over me. "Thank you, Lisa. This means a lot." "You're welcome," she said. "Take care, Michael." With Harris out of the picture, I hoped we could finally move forward. But the threats he had made still lingered in my mind. I knew he was a man capable of anything, and I couldn't let my guard down. One evening, Emily and I were sitting in the living room watching a movie when there was a sudden knock on the door. My heart raced as I got up to answer it. Standing there was Harris, his face twisted with rage. "What are you doing here?" I demanded, stepping outside and closing the door behind me. Harris sneered. "I warned you, Michael. You think you can get rid of me that easily?" "I don't know what you think you're going to accomplish," I said, trying to stay calm. "You're done here. Just leave us alone." He took a step closer, his voice low and menacing. "You don't get it, do you? I'll make your life a living hell." Before I could react, he lunged at me, shoving me back against the door. We grappled for a moment, each trying to gain the upper hand. Emily must have heard the commotion because she flung the door open, her eyes wide with fear. "Stop it!" she screamed. "Leave us alone, Harris." Harris ignored her, his focus solely on me. In the chaos, I managed to push him away and grab my phone. "I'm calling the police," I said, my voice shaking. Harris hesitated, his eyes flicking between me and Emily. "This isn't over," he spat before turning and stalking off into the night. I quickly dialed 911, my heart pounding in my chest. The operator assured me that officers were on their way, and within minutes the police arrived. We gave them a detailed account of what had happened, and they promised to keep an eye out for Harris. That night, as we sat in the safety of our home, I realized how close we had come to disaster. Emily and I held each other tightly, the fear and adrenaline slowly fading. "We can't live like this," I said quietly. "We need to find a way to feel safe again." Emily nodded, her eyes filled with determination. "We'll get through this, Michael, together." The next few weeks were a blur of police reports, security measures, and therapy sessions. We installed new locks, added security cameras, and made sure we were always aware of our surroundings. The police increased their patrols in our neighborhood, and gradually the tension began to ease. One evening, as we were having dinner, my phone buzzed with a notification. It was a news alert about Harris. He had been arrested for assaulting another former colleague and was now facing serious charges. I showed the article to Emily, and she let out a sigh of relief. "Maybe now we can finally move on." "Yeah," I said, feeling a weight lift off my shoulders. "Maybe we can." With Harris out of the picture, we focused on rebuilding our lives. The road to healing was long and challenging, but we faced it together, stronger than before. Our relationship was not the same as it had been, but it was growing, evolving into something new. As the months passed, we found a new rhythm. We traveled to places we had always wanted to visit, spent time with friends and family, and rediscovered the joy of being together. The pain of the past was still there, but it no longer defined us. One evening, as we sat on the porch watching the sunset, I realized how far we had come. The future was uncertain, but I knew that as long as we faced it together, we could overcome anything. As the months went by, the memory of Harris and his threats began to fade. Emily and I had made significant progress in our relationship, and our lives were slowly returning to a semblance of normalcy. However, the scars of the past were still there, a constant reminder of what we had been through. The company decided to host another work party, a way to boost morale and celebrate the end of a challenging year. Despite my initial reluctance, Emily convinced me to attend. She believed it would be a good opportunity to show everyone that we had moved on and were stronger than ever. The night of the party arrived, and the atmosphere was lively and festive. The banquet hall was beautifully decorated, and the mood was one of celebration. Emily and I mingled with colleagues, enjoying the evening. For the first time in a long while, I felt at ease. As the night progressed, I found myself deep in conversation with John from accounting, discussing the latest company developments. Emily was across the room, chatting with Sarah and a few others. Everything seemed perfect, like a scene from a dream. But then, the dream turned into a nightmare. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw Harris enter the room. He had somehow managed to get past security and was making a beeline for Emily. My heart sank as I watched him approach her, a menacing look on his face. Before I could react, Harris had reached Emily and was speaking to her in hushed tones. I quickly excused myself from the conversation and made my way over to them, my mind racing with worry. As I approached, I heard Harris's voice, cold and threatening. "Tomorrow your wife will go on vacation with me or you are fired." Emily looked at him, her face pale with fear. "I agree," she exclaimed, her voice trembling. The words sent a shockwave through me. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Emily's sudden agreement felt like a betrayal, reopening old wounds that had barely begun to heal. "I need some air," I muttered, turning on my heel and storming out of the room. The cool night air hit me like a splash of cold water, but it did little to calm my seething emotions. I paced back and forth outside, my mind a whirlwind of thoughts. How could Harris still have this hold over us? And why would Emily agree to his outrageous demand? My mind struggled to find answers, but none of them made sense. Then an idea began to form. It was a dangerous, desperate idea, but I felt cornered with no other options. I hurried to my car and retrieved the small black case I kept in the glove compartment. Inside was a Gun VJA relic from my time in the military, a reminder of a past life I had hoped to leave behind. I checked the chamber, making sure it was loaded, and then headed back inside. The party was still going on, but the atmosphere had changed. People were whispering, casting worried glances toward the door. When I entered the room, all eyes turned to me. The room fell silent as I walked back to where Harris and Emily were standing. I could see the shock and fear in their eyes as they realized what I was holding. I raised the gun, pointing it directly at my boss. "This ends now," I said, my voice steady despite the turmoil inside me. "No one makes demands like that of my wife and gets away with it." Harris's face went pale, but he managed to keep his composure. "Michael, put the gun down. We can talk about this." "There's nothing to talk about," I replied coldly. "You threatened my livelihood and disrespected my wife. You don't deserve a second chance." The tension in the room was palpable. People were frozen in place, too afraid to move or speak. The band had stopped playing, and the only sound was the faint hum of the air conditioning. Emily stepped forward, her eyes pleading. "Michael, please, this isn't the way." I glanced at her, my heart aching. "Why did you agree to his demand, Emily? Why would you do that?" She took a deep breath, her eyes filled with tears. "I thought it was the only way to protect you. I didn't want you to lose your job." Her words hit me like a sledgehammer. I lowered the gun slightly, my resolve wavering. But at what cost? Our marriage? Our dignity? Before she could answer, a commotion erupted near the entrance. Several security guards had arrived, alerted by the guests. They approached cautiously, their hands on their weapons. "Michael, please," one of them said, his voice calm and reassuring. "Put the gun down. We can work this out." I looked around the room, seeing the fear and concern on everyone's faces. The weight of my actions began to sink in. This wasn't the answer. Violence would only make things worse. With a heavy sigh, I lowered the gun completely and handed it to the nearest guard. "I'm sorry," I said, my voice breaking. I didn't know what else to do." The guards quickly took the gun and escorted me out of the room. As I was led away, I caught one last glimpse of Emily, her face a mask of worry and sorrow. The party had turned into a living nightmare, and I had no idea what would happen next. All I knew was that my life had changed forever in that one fateful moment. In the days that followed, I was charged with brandishing a firearm in a public place and faced serious legal consequences. My actions, though driven by desperation, had severe ramifications. I was sentenced to community service and mandatory counseling. Emily stood by me through the trial, her presence a reminder of the complex emotions that had led us to this point. Despite everything, she continued to express her desire to rebuild our relationship. The counseling sessions helped me confront my anger and the deep-seated issues that had driven me to such extreme measures. Emily and I attended couples therapy together, slowly working through our trust issues and learning to communicate more openly. Harris, on the other hand, faced his own set of legal troubles. His history of inappropriate behavior and the assault on another colleague led to his conviction and imprisonment. Justice had finally been served, and the shadow he had cast over our lives began to lift. The road to recovery was long and challenging, but Emily and I were committed to healing together. We moved to a new town, seeking a fresh start away from the memories of our past. It was a chance to rebuild our lives and create a future free from the pain and betrayal that had once defined us. As the years passed, we found new ways to connect and rediscovered the love that had brought us together in the first place. Our journey was far from perfect, but it was ours. We had faced the darkness and emerged stronger, ready to embrace whatever the future held. In the end, we learned that true strength comes not from avoiding adversity, but from facing it head-on and finding the courage to move forward. Together, we forged a new path, one built on trust, resilience, and the enduring power of love.